Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Baseline View here on Power Mizzou. Appreciate you either skipping a little bit of work, getting off early, or maybe tuning in at work and sticking around the office a little bit late to listen to us. Maybe listen to us on your way home, whatever. However you're listening to us, whatever you're doing, we appreciate you being here. And Missouri and South Carolina tip off in an hour. Actually, in about 58 minutes now. On the SEC network, Mizzou ranked 19th in the country. South Carolina has played a grand total of 6 games so far this season. Game number 7 going to be at Mizzou Arena at 6. We're going to take you right up to tip-off. We're going to let you hear from Kobe Brown in a few minutes. We talked to him yesterday. Going to let you hear from Colin Taylor, who covers the Gamecocks for the Rivals Network. And then we're going to let you hear from Mitchell Forty at the arena. We'll check in with him about 5:40, 20 minutes before tip. He is covering the game in person for us. We'll have all your coverage on the message boards and on the site tonight. So, hey, your comments, your questions, anything you guys want to talk about, preferably basketball related to this game, but whatever. You want to talk about, Tennessee breaking rules and needing a football coach. You want to talk about other things with Mizzou, that's fine. But certainly want your comments in the chat and, take part here. We try to let you guys guide the show because it's much more fun that way. Missouri coming off a win on Saturday. They beat Texas A&M. Didn't look great for the first 15 minutes or so. But the good news was they were playing Texas A&M, and Texas A&M was really not good enough to make them pay for not playing well early on. Missouri was down 24-17 and then went on a 10-0 run to end the half, went up 27-24. Second half wasn't close. A&M actually even got worse in the second half, only scored, I think, 28 points in the second half. And Missouri got better, shot 53% from the field, only had 4 turnovers. And Mizzou went on to a 68-52 win that evened their record at 2-2 in the league, 8-2 overall. They fell a couple spots in the top 25 because other teams played a little bit more, all that. But they're still number 19, ranked for a 6th week in a row as they take on South Carolina tonight. And then we'll hit the road for Knoxville, Tennessee on Saturday for a big 6-game stretch, really 7-game stretch, 6 in the SEC. And the 7th is against TCU in the Big 12 SEC Challenge, which Missouri gets to participate in this year. So big games coming up. Tonight's game, it's completely unknown. We don't know anything about South Carolina. They've barely been on the floor. Jared is hoping for a stress-free game tonight after recovering from the Chiefs game on Sunday. So what would be the equivalent for Missouri tonight? It would be like, because they don't have one guy that's as important as Mahomes, but it would be like if 4 guys fouled out with 10 minutes left, and all of a sudden, you're tossing Ed Chang, Jordan Wilmore, Torrance Watson, and Parker Brown out there to replace everybody, and you got to hold on to a lead. That would probably be the equivalent of Sunday's Chiefs game. So, yeah, Jared, I'm sure Konzo Martin would join you in a stress-free game. And, really, Missouri's last game was pretty stress-free for about the last 12, 14 minutes. I mean, there was once Missouri got up on top, there wasn't much hope that A&M was coming back because A&M is just so incredibly limited offensively. This South Carolina team, like I said, they are 3-3. They're, I believe, 1-1 in the SEC. They have had COVID issues just from the jump. I mean, they have had so many games canceled. So here was their season. They opened and played Liberty, lost that game. Missouri beat Liberty. South Carolina lost to Liberty 78-62. They then beat a pretty decent Tulsa team 69-58. Y'all might be familiar with their coach. Went to Houston, lost 77-67. Houston's a good team this year. Game against Wofford canceled. Game against Clemson postponed. Game against South Carolina State canceled. Game against Kentucky postponed. They got back on the court to play Florida A&M and Texas A&M. And then lost at LSU. But we heard from Frank Martin on the SEC coaches teleconference a couple weeks ago, and they had one. It was, I think, December 27th. Maybe we talked to him, and they hadn't practiced since December 7th. I mean, they had been just completely off for 3 weeks, doing some individual workouts and stuff. I'm sure, like Missouri did during its break, but they missed a lot of time. So they're just now getting back on the floor. Frank Martin actually missed Saturday's game at LSU because he was tested positive for COVID for a second time. He is back on the bench in Columbia, Missouri, tonight for the Gamecocks. So South Carolina, we believe to be at full strength. Missouri, we believe to be at full strength. So, again, we know much more about Missouri. I mean, South Carolina, it's just hard to tell. They did lose that game to Liberty, but they actually led LSU for quite a while on Saturday, and LSU closed strong and played well late and won that game. Todd says, is Pickett as important as he seems? It isn't flashy, but he appears to be able to get into the paint whenever he wants. He's important in this way. When he plays well, Missouri's really good, and it's not just this year. It's in the last 2 seasons, I believe the stat is when he's in double figures, Missouri is in 11-1. So I don't know which game it was that he scored 10 or more and Missouri got beat, but both Illinois games, I believe it was Arkansas where he was in double figures. I mean, if he scores 10 points, Missouri wins almost all the time. And so I don't know if he's that important in that. Like, I don't think he's one of Missouri's 3 or 4 most important players, but I think he and Tillman are guys you look at and say, if they're playing well, this is a good basketball team. Obviously, Jeremiah Tillman's been playing really well. 19-9 in his last 3 games, has his season averages up to about 11 and 7.5 rebounds, which is by far a career high. He's basically been a 4.5 rebound per game guy for 3 years. And now he's averaging 7.5. So I think that's been big. He's played under control. He's played, he hadn't been really in foul trouble lately. He's played, and I know as I say that he'll probably have 3 in the first half tonight. But he's played really well lately. Drew Smith put together a really nice game in the win over A&M. 14 points, 6 boards, 6 assists, 4 steals after really not playing very well at all for the last couple weeks. But he put together a nice game. Obviously, Xavier Pinson has been pretty good. A lot of this year wasn't very good in the last game. You'd like to see him bounce back. You'd like to see Mark Smith get things going a little bit, especially with the jump shot. But Tillman, Pickett, Drew Smith, those guys playing pretty well right now. And Todd says, is it that there isn't anyone else at the 3-4 position to score? Maybe a little bit of it, yeah. I mean, Kobe Brown has shown it at times. Mitchell Smith isn't really a scorer. Mark Smith, I guess, plays the 3 technically when, and that's kind of who Pickett would sub in for, I guess, kind of that third guard wing position. So Mark Smith, still averaging almost 12 points a game. He's still this team's second leading scorer, maybe. But obviously he's been down a little bit of late. I just think Pickett's a guy that I think he knows his role, and I think he knows what he does well. He will take a 3 or 2 here and there, but he knows overall that's not really his game. He's a guy, he's going to get in the lane, he's going to get out on a fast break, he's going to get an offensive rebound. That's what Javon Pickett does. And more than anybody on this team probably, all he does is what he does well. He's not out there taking 6 threes in a game and trying to do a whole bunch of things he can't do. He does what he's good at, and that leads to some games, obviously, where he's a pretty important part. Ron Davis joining us. Ron, glad to see you, man. Is this a game where Mizzou can be in trouble if Tillman regresses to his mean, and who's going to have to step up? Look, I think Missouri can be in trouble in any game if Tillman, steps back and has 6 points and 4 rebounds. I mean, he is the most important player on the floor. Because he had 14 and 10 at A&M, but he was far more dominant than that. He was, as Konzo said after the game, he was the best player on the floor. It wasn't particularly close, So I think he's a guy that almost every game you look at and say, this is a guy that if he's able to, go for 18 and 10 or whatever, then obviously Missouri's really tough to stop. If he is in foul trouble or if he's just not engaged and he has 6 points and 5 rebounds. Yeah, that's so I don't know that this game in particular is any more like that than any other game because I think most games Missouri plays are like that. But if Tillman does have an off night, which hey, you know what? Guys are going to have off nights, obviously. So Tillman, he's probably not going to have 19-9 every night. He's going to hit a night where he doesn't. And when that happens, Pinson, Drew Smith, Mark Smith are the three guys that really need to pick up the load and a little bit out of Kobe Brown. Kobe Brown's a guy that can get you 15 on a given night. He's not going to get you 15 every night. Pickett, kind of like Pickett. He's a guy that can get you 15, but you don't count on him for 15. Mitchell Smith really isn't that guy. I mean, I don't know what Mitch's career high is. I'm sure he scored 15 before, but that's not something that you count on out of him. You look at South Carolina's lineup, again, 6 games. It's a small sample size, but A.J. Lawson's clearly the lead guy there. Jermaine Cuisinart is averaging 12.5. Justin Minaya is kind of a do-everything. He's a little bit like Pickett. Now he's bigger. But 9 points, 7.5 boards. I think he's 6'10". I think he's probably the guy that's going to be matched up with Jeremiah Tillman most of the night. It was interesting. You'll hear later on when we talk to Colin Taylor, who covers. I'm sorry, Justin Minaya is 6'6". I had Minaya confused with somebody else, and it's Wildenslavick. Is South Carolina's 6'11", 230-pound center. It doesn't have big numbers. He is averaging 6.8 points, 5 rebounds in about 20 minutes a game. But he's the guy that's going to be matched up with Tillman. But, again, when we talk to Colin Taylor, and you'll hear that here in a little bit, he said this is a South Carolina team that actually is going to play a little bit more zone than Frank Martin teams have in the past. So I found that pretty interesting. Cody Helderman. Cody, appreciate you being here with us, man. How much do you think the time off helps Drew Smith? Maybe he was a little banged up and needed a good rest. We saw it last year. He'll definitely play through pain. And that's an interesting question because before the A&M game, Mitchell Forty actually asked Konzo, hey, Drew's had his wrist taped. Is that affecting him? And Konzo just said, no, he's out there. He's good. Now, you got to understand, listening to Konzo Martin, this is a dude that grew up in East St. Louis, beat cancer, later found out he had knees that basically shouldn't have allowed him to play. Like, he's been through some things. So, to Konzo Martin, if you're playing, you're not injured. If you're able to play in the game, then you are 100% healthy, and all that is not an excuse. So, was the wrist affecting Drew Smith? It could have been. But Saturday was really the first time, I would say in 3 or 4 weeks, that we saw the guy that we saw at times last year. That he didn't dominate the game. Like, I didn't know during the game that Drew Smith was playing really well. And then I looked down at the end of it, and he had 14 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, and 4 steals. I mean, just loading the stat sheet everywhere. So, and that's the kind of game that he had frequently for Missouri last year, that got him second-team All-SEC, and that led Konzo to say such glowing things about him, like he's one of the best guards in the league and all that. So you guys know Missouri's personnel well. Obviously don't know South Carolina's as well. Neither do I. Neither does anybody else, because very few people have seen it. But as we do on this show, we checked in with a colleague, a friend of mine who covers them. So going to let you listen to that now. All right, talking with Colin Taylor of GamecocksCentral.com. He covers South Carolina hoops for the Rivals Network. Colin, how you doing, man?
We are living the dream. We're getting to play basketball games, and at this point in the season, with what South Carolina's gone through, that is the number one priority at this point.
Yeah. So, I mean, South Carolina's 3-3. They've had games canceled and postponed and everything. Can you just kind of let Missouri fans in on exactly what's happened there?
Yeah, so they started the season. They got to play their first 3 games. Their third game was at Houston, right as Houston entered their big COVID issues. South Carolina came back from that, had some positive tests, and the positive tests turned into a week-long shutdown that turned into a month-long shutdown with 2 separate COVID pauses in there. They had 5 games canceled, played 2 games, had 2 more, and then got more COVID cases after playing 2 games. And then Frank Martin's tested positive. So in reality, it's been now 43 days and they've played 3 total games. So yeah, it's been frustrating for them. It's been frustrating for us trying to cover them, but hopefully the worst is behind them and now they're getting to play. And yeah, Frank Martin and another 2 assistants didn't coach against LSU last week, and they had 2 more players out. So they're still not at full strength right now. And there's a lot more that is probably set to be figured out as they get into this week.
Yeah, I know Frank wasn't at the LSU game. Do you guys know yet Tuesday night in Columbia whether he and his staff will be here or not?
Yeah, so Frank Martin, we talked to him last week, and the plan was for him to exit isolation today, so on Monday. We don't know if that means he can get right back into it. We're talking to him this afternoon, Monday afternoon, to get an update. But I don't necessarily anticipate maybe a full staff, just because you don't know with all the COVID stuff. But there's possibility that Frank Martin will be on the flight to Como and coaching in this game.
All right, so kind of moving past all of that, and I know like skipping the elephant in the room here. I mean, do you have any idea how good this South Carolina team is? I guess what were the expectations for this team before all of this happened?
I mean, the expectation was the NCAA tournament. On paper, this is South Carolina's best team since that 2017 team that went to a Final Four. You had 70, I think over 70% production returning at every key statistic. You returned 4 starters. And this was supposed to be the conversations I've had publicly and privately, this was supposed to be a team that not only could make the tournament, but do some damage in it once they got into the tournament. And that's kind of, the frustrating parts, that the fact that they haven't been able to showcase that, the fact that they've been shorthanded, the fact that they've played 6 games since November 28th, when the majority of the teams not only in the SEC, but in the country are playing, double digits. You're at 10 or 12 games at this point. So to answer your long story short, no, we don't know how good this team is. They've beaten a decent Tulsa team. They absolutely walloped Texas A&M at home shorthanded, and they were competitive with Houston and LSU, 2 teams that are probably NCAA tournament caliber. So you just don't know. We'll know more about this team Tuesday night when they play another good team in Missouri, as they get more consistent practice time, as they play games. And the big question is, will it be enough to build a tournament resume when you're only playing 19 games compared to other teams playing 25 or 30. So you think this team's good. They've shown potential, but the sample size is just so small right now that you really just don't know.
The one thing I think we do know is that their best player is AJ Lawson. I
Yeah.
mean, averaging 18 and a half, and it's a small sample size, but he's likely to be their leading scorer. What are the biggest kind of supporting pieces around Lawson?
Yeah. Jermaine Couisnard is a guy that is in his, I guess, is now redshirt sophomore year. He's their kind of go-to scorer at times when Lawson's either not scoring or just in a funk or inconsistent, which hasn't been the case much this year. He's a shooting guard that they've made play point just because they don't have consistent point guard play right now. He's a guy that I've been really impressed with the last year and a half with his just general mental makeup. He's a leader. Keyshawn Bryant is one of the more athletic players in the SEC, just coming off. Saturday was his first game in a month, coming off that COVID pause for him. He's someone that put up 26 points against LSU, can jump out the gym, can give you a lot. And then a guy that I think a lot of people don't know about that need to is Wildenslavick. He's their starting center the last 3 games, 6'10". He's the only guy that's played a game and is 6'10" on this roster. They just don't have a lot of bigs, so he gives them some rim protection. He's averaging 9 points over his last 3. Very good piece that's kind of rounding into form. So those are the guys that I would look at. And Justin Minaya is someone that feels like he's been at South Carolina for 16 years. He's probably drawn retirement from the state of South Carolina right now, but he just kind of does it all. He's a glue guy. He's not going to put up 25 a night, but he'll give you 8 points, 6 rebounds, 5 blocks, and 4 assists, and just kind of does everything for him. So they're small, but those are the kind of guys that have been productive for South Carolina when they've been on the court this year.
So even going back to the days when I covered him in the Big 12, Frank's great teams have been able to score, but even his bad teams play defense.
Yeah.
So where does this team fall in that spectrum as far as how good are they defensively? And then is this one of his teams that maybe has the offense to go with that?
I think so. Defensively, they've been good but not great. They're not up to maybe what you expect from a Frank Martin team right now in the season, just because, like, again, they haven't had a lot of time to work on it, a lot of time together to develop that cohesion that's so important. So you'll see Tuesday night, you're going to see some zone. You're going to see some trapping through the zone, some matchup zone, just because they need to get back in better conditioning and they have the length to play some more zone than they've played in the past. So it's not your typical man-to-man that a Frank Martin team's known for, but they're still, top 50 in defensive efficiency in KenPom and can really muck things up for another team on that end of the court. And offensively, they're not the most efficient group. They don't shoot particularly well and turn the ball over a lot, but damn, they go fast. And they're going to get possessions out of games. And the more possessions they have, the better they play. And they like to run, which leads to points. They're 80th right now. I'm looking at it in offensive efficiency, but they're averaging, they've scored 80 points or 75 points a bunch. They scored 80 against LSU. So when they get going, they can put up some points. It's just a matter of being able to get out in the open court and run in transition is really when this offense starts to click.
This all sounds very familiar. Pretty good defensive team, can't shoot, likes to run, and turns the ball over a lot. Like this is the two teams are just going to mirror each other on Tuesday night. So, but you brought up something that, like, I've wondered about a lot lately is that, South Carolina's sitting here 1-1 in the league. Missouri's already lost a couple games. We don't know how many of these games are going to get made up or when they're going to get made up. Have you guys talked about much, like, what happens when we get to the SEC tournament and you've got to seed 14 teams and you've got South Carolina sitting here at like 8-6, and then, somebody maybe at 9-9 who has more wins but a worse winning percentage? I've got no idea how all that's going to work.
I don't either. And to be honest, I don't think the coaches do either.
Yeah.
I think that's one of those things where when we get to Nashville in March, mid-March, and number one, I think they're just going to be happy to get through a season at that point. But they get there and they're like, all right, what are we going to do? I think it'll be very grab bag of like, okay, win percentage this, or to be honest with you, I don't even know how you would do it. Feels like win percentage is the key, but right now I think the priority for every SEC coach and every SEC athletic director is just let us get through the next month and a half, get to a tournament, and we'll figure it out from there.
Well, we kind of thought that in football season too, right? We started the season and everybody's like, just play games. And then as we started playing games, every coach was coming out, well, you can't be in the playoff with only 6 games. Well, you can't do that. All of a sudden, we find out at the end of the year that the coaches who say, hey, everything's okay, just play games, don't really mean that when it starts to affect their team. So I'll be interested to see how it goes.
Yeah, and Frank Martin's notably been a guy that will lobby for his team to be in NCAA tournaments and be in the NIT when they're on the bubble, or maybe they have some bad losses. He's done it in the past, which good for him. Lobby for your team, go to bat for your guys. I'm interested to see what that looks like near the end of the year because South Carolina has a knack of going on runs and putting together really good wins late in conference play or in conference play. And I'm going to be interested to see what that looks like for him and what kind of resume South Carolina has and how he can kind of go to bat for his guys. Because, right now you don't know. Even in the SEC, there's an idea of who's good, but we really don't know at this point because every team's going through different circumstances. South Carolina looks good, but has like every guy has essentially, been out for a month. So we just don't know right now. And I'm going to be interested to see how it looks at the end of the year and how coaches, not Frank Martin in particular, but SEC coaches in general, try to fandangle the numbers to make it seem like they have a really good NCAA tournament resume.
And I have been impressed both with Frank and Konzo. Both, I think, are two of the guys that have been out front saying, they are two of the more realistic, honest guys that say, hey, we just want to play games. And if Konzo said, if I lose a game because my guys went home for Christmas, I don't care. It's fine. But last thing I wanted to jump to real quick was football. And I've said for years, really since Missouri joined the SEC, is that Missouri, South Carolina, Kentucky, and at this point, Tennessee are kind of in this group where your goal every year is be the best of those four, be the best of the middle class in the East, and then hope that things line up in certain years to catch Georgia or Florida. South Carolina at times has been there. Recently, it's been Kentucky. This year, it was Missouri, I think. So what's the optimism with Shane Beamer and with what's going on there? And I assume he will put a full coaching staff on the field before Auburn takes all of them.
Yeah.
But, the hopes that he can get them back to that point pretty soon.
Yeah. I think if you had asked me a couple weeks ago, the answer would be a lot different than the answer I'm going to give you right now. I think fans right now are in a very big wait and see. I think they're happy to get rid of Will Muschamp just because of what was going on around the program and just the toxicity around it near the end of his tenure. And then you go out and, number one, you don't have a full staff right now. You've lost your offensive coordinator, your defensive line coach, and your offensive line coach to Auburn. They just lost their director of player personnel to Texas. I think the fans are just very anxious right now. There's reason for optimism, but they want to see what the support staff looks like. They want to see first of all, the entire coaching staff looks like and how well this staff can recruit, not only to finish this 2021 group, but 2022. And it's just a lot of wait and see mode. Now, I will say Shane Beamer's done a really good job of playing the hits. He's brought back a bunch of former players to be analysts, to be in off the field positions. So bringing back a lot of good nostalgia for South Carolina fans. And I think that is part of the reason why there's so much optimism, is because he's linking those Spurrier years where they were really, really good, that 3 or 4 year stretch, to what it is now, and hoping that culture, that mentality that they had in 2010 through 2013, trickles down to the players now.
All right. Well, Colin, appreciate your time, man. I want a little bit of credit for making it through 12 minutes and not bringing up any football games that were played over the weekend. So
no idea what you're talking about.
All right, Colin, have a good day, man. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah. Appreciate it, Gabe.
All right. Colin is a noted Browns fan. So I made it through without talking any Chiefs Browns. Again, I do deserve a little bit of credit for that. Mizzou and South Carolina now 30 minutes away at Mizzou Arena on the SEC Network. Believe it is Tom Hart and John Sunvold on the call, so you will get a Como-flavored broadcast. I think that's a good thing. Almost anybody else that calls games on the SEC Network, I have to mute. But I enjoy the games with Tom and or John on the call. And so that is what you will get tonight. This series, as you see over there, tied 6 apiece. South Carolina, that game last year, I would say was the low point of Missouri's season. It was absolutely dreadful. And I remember, because I was listening on the radio. I don't remember where I was, but I was driving somewhere, obviously. And I was listening to that game on the radio, and it was just, it was dreadful. There was like not a minute where it appeared Missouri was going to compete in that game, much less win that game. That was they played that game, let me see, on February 1st. They were coming off a win over Georgia. Played that game, lost 76-54. Was just, there was nothing good. They scored 26 points in the first half. As a team, they were 19 of 58 from the floor. They were 4 for 19 from three-point range. Mitchell Smith was 0 for 4. Drew Smith was 0 for 4. Trey Jackson played 16 minutes in that game and was 0 for 3. There's a blast from the past for you. But Missouri just did absolutely nothing well in that game. Only got out-rebounded 36-34. So, that, I guess, counts for something. But South Carolina destroyed them in that game. And then following that one, Missouri went to Texas A&M and got blown out by 17. Came back and beat Arkansas, but then lost at LSU. So, that started off kind of a stretch that really, I think, if Missouri's season wasn't over before that last year, it was over at that point. So, who knows? Maybe a little payback for the Gamecocks. I want to invite you guys again. I know there's a few of you checking in. It's again, basketball's kind of weird. We have to move things around. Games aren't always played at the same time or on the same day, so it's different than football. We're trying to get more and more people in here, but I do want to invite you to do a couple things for us. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel while you're here. That way you'll get alerts when we do go live. We do pre- and post-game for every Hoops game the rest of the season, all the way through the tournament. The exception will be if Missouri's in the Final Four, I'm going to be there, so we probably won't be doing live pre- and post-game at that point. But other than that, leading up to that point in the season, we will certainly be doing this for every game. Invite you guys to like the shows, subscribe to the channel, and certainly participate like Cam Cameron is doing. And Cam is one of our regular viewers here, and appreciate you being here, Cam. If Mark Smith can get his shots to start falling, this team goes from good but frustrating to legitimate top 4 seed in the tournament. Yeah, like as of today, I think they would be borderline top 4 seed in the tournament. The resume to me says they would be a top 4 seed. I'm not sure they would be, but they've got a chance. I mean, that's what they're playing for the rest of this year. I think that's the ceiling is get a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament, and Mark Smith certainly is part of that. It's interesting. He's still Missouri's second leading 3-point shooter. He's at 36%. Drew Smith is at 36.7. So Mark Smith, despite his struggles lately, is still the second best shooter and very close to the best shooter on this team. Now, it's interesting. I went through a lot of the stats with Mark on Monday morning on our message board, and I'm just going to show you kind of what I found, because there's a thought, and I think it's based in reality, at least I did before I started looking this up, that Mark Smith is a guy who makes a lot of shots and racks up a lot of points against some of the lesser teams on Missouri's schedule. And then when it comes league play, high major teams, he tends to fall off a little bit. So this year, Mark Smith against high major competition is 8 for 28. He was 3 for 6 against Oregon. You take that away, that means he's 5 for 22 in the other high major games, which is below 25%, somewhere around like 23% or something like that. Against mid-major and low-major competition this year, he's 10 for 22. So that's 45%. He is shooting 17% better against the low to mid-major teams than he is against high majors. Now, the problem for Missouri, obviously, is they don't play any low to mid-majors the rest of the year, right? So I look back at last year. Last year against high major teams, 32%, mid and low majors, 46%. So this has been going on for a year and a half now. But interestingly, his first year at Missouri, he shot 44.4% against mid and low majors, and 45.2% against high majors. So he's made shots against this level of competition before. It's just been a year and a half. I think the bigger problem with Mark Smith than the three-point shooting is actually the turnovers. I mean, he puts the ball on the floor. It's simply not a very good thing. He is turning the ball. He has a turnover rate, according to KenPom, of 24.6%. Drew Smith and Xavier Pinson are at 21. Everybody else is below 20. And Pinson and Drew Smith, I mean, they handle the ball a lot. Mark Smith turns the ball over way too much for a guard. So one of two things has to happen. He either has to quit doing that, or he has to just quit handling the ball and be more of a catch-and-shoot guy, which I know Konzo has told us for 2 years he's not. There's more to his game, but we've never really seen it. And I don't want to put all this team struggles, and there haven't been many. Let's remind ourselves of that. They're 8-2 and they're ranked 19th in the country. But I don't want to put all the things that we're harping on and what's holding this team back from being even better on Mark Smith. He is a part of it, though, certainly. He was good early in the season. Was Missouri's leading scorer easily through 3 or 4 games, and has obviously fallen off in the last 5 or 6. So, if he gets going again, that certainly is going to help Missouri toward those goals that they want to get. Cody Helderman says, I'm just glad Chris Silva is gone yet. He was there for a minute, and he seemed to play really well against Missouri. He was actually, I thought he was one of the most underrated guys probably in the entire SEC. I really liked watching Silva play, but he did have a little bit of Jeremiah Tillman in him where he'd have 21 and 12 one game and 4 and 4 the next game and foul out, 8 minutes in. But I thought he was an underrated player for Frank Martin's team throughout. A.J. Lawson, to me, seems like a guy that's been there for 7-8 years, Now watch, I'll look him up, and he'll probably be like a sophomore. He's a junior. So I guess it's only his third season. For some reason, it seems like A.J. Lawson's been around a long time to me. But he is certainly the main guy on this team, the leading scorer, the best player. They've got other guys, and it was interesting. Hopes were higher for this South Carolina team than I realized at the beginning of the season. And listening to Colin a few minutes ago, they thought this was a pretty certain NCAA tournament team before the season. And I knew that they'd be, I didn't think they were going to be like in the bottom 3 in the league or anything, but I guess I just didn't realize quite what the hopes were for South Carolina. Has Konzo ever been asked or given a reason why Pinson doesn't play 32 minutes a game? Bit of a down game Saturday, but he's played well all year, and I've never seen anything to suggest he gets gassed. Konzo subs a lot. I haven't asked him specifically. If we go back to last year, which I will do here shortly, I bet that down the stretch, Xavier Pinson was playing a lot more minutes. He's averaging 26 minutes right now. And part of that is Missouri's had some games in hand. I think part of it is that, you've only got 10 games. So if you have a game where you don't play very much, it drops your average. He only played 19 or 20 minutes on Saturday, and I actually thought that was a good move by Konzo because he wasn't playing very well in that game. So that's going to drag your average down a little bit. He was probably averaging more like 27 minutes or something like that before that game. But actually, last year, Xavier Pinson averaged 24 minutes. Now, that was greatly affected by the fact that earlier in the season, he played a little bit less. Once he kind of went on a tear, which started with the Arkansas game. It was about the last 9-10 games of last year. I had 24 points in 41 minutes. Obviously, an overtime game, barely came off the floor. Next time out, 9 points in 30 against LSU, 28 and 31 against Auburn, 32 and 27 against Ole Miss, 15 and 31 against Arkansas, 17 and 21 against Vandy, 20 and 37 against Mississippi State, 16 and 30 against Ole Miss, and 9 and 29 against Alabama. So in the last 9 games of the year last year, he played at least 27 minutes in 8 of them, at least 29 minutes in 7 of them, at least 30 in 6 of them. So I think maybe down the stretch, that's something, as the season goes on, you might see some more 32, 33-minute games out of him. Drew Smith played 37, I believe, on Saturday. So those are the two guys that really I think Konzo feels like he can put out there for 35 minutes a game and not worry about it too much. But again, I think we're nitpicking a little bit, looking for things to complain about on a team that is 8-2 on the season, So, and I understand, hey, that's what we do. We're always looking for, hey, how can things improve? Where can things get better? But I think we do obviously need to realize that overall, I think we should probably be pretty happy. If you guys can hear that ringing in the background, which you may be able to, we're calling up Mitchell Forty, who is at Mizzou Arena, which is the background noise at Mizzou Arena is fantastic. We like that. What's up, Mitch? How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Hanging in. So I assume South Carolina made it. Frank Martin is here. It looks like we're going to have a game in 20 minutes.
Yeah, I haven't seen Frank Martin, but I haven't seen Konzo Martin either. Usually the head coaches don't like to come out too early before basketball games, but all 12 Mizzou players are here. All 15 South Carolina players are here, so it seems safe to say they're going to play.
Well, it's also very jarring. Frank Martin now has a shaved head, and he looks quite different.
Yeah. Maybe I just didn't recognize him, but I know I've seen it already this year. It was a little bit jarring, like you said, the first time, but I'm prepared to see both, Frank.
All right, so we've been talking a little bit about coming off this weekend. Drew Smith, I said when you asked Konzo about him last week, he said, no, he's fine. He's playing. He's fine. Well, Konzo's definition of healthy is he's on the floor. So do we think maybe the rest helped Drew Smith a little bit because he played really well on Saturday?
Something helped, yeah. I mean, like, I think it would make sense if it was the rest. Also, he didn't get in foul trouble, which was huge.
Yeah.
So, I think more that might be even a bigger thing than his wrist. But yeah, I mean, like, if he can play like he did on Saturday, that's huge. Just a guy who's steady, who comes up with some threes, some baskets, some steals, and who just kind of does a little bit of everything. I think he had 6 rebounds, 6 assists, 4 steals. That'll get it done.
Speaking of guys that have stayed out of foul trouble, I mean, Jeremiah Tillman 19-9 in the last 3 games, and like it's tempting to say, hey, with this guy every game they can be really good, but you also just you keep waiting for the game of 5 and 4 where he kind of looks like he wants to be somewhere else.
Right, and yeah, that probably will happen at some point. But I think you can also say, this is the best stretch, probably 3-game stretch of his career. He's playing the best basketball of his career, and he's a guy who does definitely feed on being confident, and he needs to be engaged early on, and I think it does help to be coming off some good games. But yeah, no, I don't think anyone should fall into a trap of necessarily saying he's got it completely figured out or is going to be that guy every single night.
So as far as South Carolina goes, I know you wrote the preview this morning, and I was saying, like, I knew hopes were kind of high for this team, but I didn't realize how high. Like, South Carolina fans started this season thinking they had a pretty surefire SEC or NCAA tournament team, maybe top 4 in the league. So we haven't seen them much, but I think they think they're pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, they brought back their 2 leading scorers. They brought back, I think, 4 of their top 5 or 4 of their top 6 scorers. Really, the main departure was just Mike Kotsar, the European guy. But, yeah, I mean, like they've got a veteran team, kind of like Missouri. They like to get up and down. They can score. They've been a good team on the glass. But yeah, it's just hard to know because like you said, they've had 7 games canceled. They've only played 6. So
sounds like national anthem's coming up. So appreciate you checking in, man. We'll let you go. And watch for the coverage later tonight. So Mitchell Forty from Mizzou Arena. We tried to time things so that we would not interrupt the national anthem. It used to seem to me they played it at like 5:51, 5:52 with like 9 minutes left on the clock. They moved it up. It's 5:43, 17 minutes till tip-off, and they're playing it. So, hey, what are you going to do? We certainly want to honor America and do not want to be unpatriotic by having Mitchell doing the show through the national anthem, so we'll let him go. Nick Marker wants to know, how important do you think Kobe Brown is to this team? I don't think he is a huge like I don't think he's a guy they need to score 20 points, right? I mean, if he does one night, great. But I think he's more of a guy that they look at and just say, rebound and play defense. Fill a role. Now, when Drew Smith's gone next year, if Pinson's gone next year, Kobe probably becomes a little more of an offensive player and a guy they need to lean on a little bit more. But I think right now he's a guy that they say, hey, rebound, defense, get some putbacks, things like that. And that's his role as far as contributing. And it was interesting. Konzo said after the game on Saturday against A&M, he thought Kobe played his best game in a Mizzou uniform. And so, that was pretty interesting. I mean, it was another guy that during the game, I don't really think that it jumped out to me, hey, he's playing really well. But I think he did a lot of things that maybe, you don't see in a stat sheet or you don't see while you're just kind of sitting there watching the game if you're not the coach. I mean, in that game, he played 23 minutes. He was 4 of 5 from the floor for 9 points, 5 rebounds. Had 2 block shots, though, had a steal, had an assist, only 1 turnover. So, hey, if Konzo Martin can get 9 and 5 out of Kobe Brown every night, I think he is going to take that and absolutely run with it. Now, I think 9 and 5 might be a little bit optimistic on the season. Let's see what he's averaging. In 17 minutes, he is averaging 5.5 rebounds, which was a little more than I thought, and 6.6 points. So, hey, if he could up that to 9 and 5, I think Konzo would be very happy with that. And that is excellent, Nick. I don't know if, and appreciate you being here with us. I don't know if this was your intent, but this leads perfectly into playing the interview we did with Kobe Brown yesterday. So here you go. You can hear from Missouri's starting forward.
Hey, Kobe, a lot of times people like to point out that you're a coach's kid as part of maybe your fundamental soundness. When you hear that, hey, he's a coach's kid, what does that bring up in your mind? What do you feel like you've gained from having that experience in your life?
I would just say, having a good idea about the game, just kind of being able to know my way around things without, having to see it first or whatever. Just having an IQ for the game or a good base for the game is pretty much what I get from that.
Mitch?
Kobe, after the game the other day, Konza said he felt like it was the best game he's seen you play in a Missouri uniform. Obviously it wasn't just the scoring with 9 points, but rebounding and defense, stuff like that. I guess what kind of was his message to you after the game individually?
He was proud of me for locking in on my assignments and just coming out with toughness and grit and just taking care of my assignment and my role for that game and keeping number 5 and the four men on that team and off the boards, and that was pretty much what he was proud of.
Colin?
Hey, Kobe, what do you remember about the South Carolina team from last year, and what's the challenge they present this week?
From last year, I remember they were fast, they could shoot, they were physical, and they like to push the ball. And I feel like they're pretty much the same. They try to do the same thing this year. I know they lost one of their big guys, but they're a pretty fast team and pretty skilled. So we just have to lock in for them.
Eric?
Kobe, coming off of Saturday's game, obviously your improvements didn't just happen all of a sudden overnight. But where do you see the biggest jump from your game last year to now?
Just being, I would say just, how comfortable I am on the floor now. The more I play or the more we, go on, I get more and more comfortable, more experience. Just, after being here a year and seeing everything once before, seeing it a second time, it comes much easier now than it did last year. And I feel like that's the biggest thing right now.
Dave Matter?
Hey, Kobe, on Saturday, Drew Smith kind of got back to playing this style and just the production that he's had. How much difference does it make when he's kind of locked in and on the floor as much as he was on Saturday?
Oh, it's a big difference. Drew Smith, he's a big part of our team. He helps run the team, him and X, in 1 and 2 positions. So when he's on, we're on. Same with Jeremiah. So we're all one big machine.
Jack?
Kobe, the way Coach Martin talks about you after games, it seems like he's got, really high expectations for you as a player. What can you say about the way he's kind of coached you so far this season?
I would say he's coached me pretty well. He's hard on me, and I love it that way. I wouldn't change it. He expects the best out of me at all times, and I just got to keep trying to go hard and give him my best as much as I can.
Colin?
Yeah, Kobe, Coach Martin doesn't seem like a guy who was ever going to change the starting lineups based on the court stuff. Just what does that mean for your confidence and for all the starters' confidence as players, knowing that it's going to stay pretty consistent for you?
Well, I'm pretty sure Coach would change the lineup if he had to, but it means a lot though. I don't really try to look at the starting lineup as like quote unquote like the best 5. I would say it's just the first 5 on the floor. We all are, just about the same. We just want to win. So no matter who starts or who comes off the bench, we all just trying to achieve that ultimate goal.
Mitch?
One thing Jeremiah said after the game was that following the Mississippi State game, Coach maybe said he wanted players to maybe be a little more vocal and point out where guys could do better. I guess who's kind of emerged and stepped into that role since that time.
In my opinion, I would say everyone. To be honest with you, he that's not really a new thing. He's been telling us that last year, and now of course. So I would think everyone is, starting, just bring out and let people know when they need to, get, pick it up or, do something better or a different way. It's no hard feelings. We're just all trying to reach the ultimate goal.
All right, so there is Kobe Brown, and coming off of that now, Cam has another question about Kobe Brown. Speaking of him, do we know anything about his brother, similar build, game to Kobe? We don't know a lot, honestly. It's been a long time since I've seen like a high major Power 5 player that just nobody seems to have really seen play. Our guys who do rankings and all that, they haven't seen him. They've seen some film, not a lot, but he's listed as a 6'6" point guard. I think Kobe was listed as like a 6'8" point guard, so Caleb might be a little smaller, but they played for their dad. I think they were kind of given the reins to the team, and that's why they were listed as point guards. I would think Caleb would be probably more of a 3, while Kobe's a 4. But I wish we knew more about him. I just don't know a ton, and we should probably try to catch up with him sometime here coming up and get a little more information on him. But he's been tough to track down, to be quite honest. Todd says combined Kobe and Pickett need to give us something. And yeah, I've talked a lot about this. Tillman needs to be pretty constant. Drew Smith needs to be pretty constant. And then, you'd like to think X Pinson is pretty consistent, and you need one other guy. It doesn't need to be the same guy every night. Mark Smith can get 20 one night. Javon Pickett can give you 12 and 6 another night. Kobe Brown can give you 14 and 6 another night. It's not all. Mitchell Smith is going to have a day. Basketball is it's so much different than football in that, it's different guys, just depending on the matchups, depending on who's playing well, who's maybe not as good that night. There's much more variance in who you're looking to kind of be contributors game to game. And I mean, in football, look, it's your starting quarterback, it's your starting running back, it's your top 2 wide receivers and your tight end. I mean, you might every now and then get a backup that jumps up and has a big game, but it doesn't happen a lot. In basketball, hey, you got a guy coming off the bench scoring 10 or 12 points all the time. So, I think, yeah, Kobe, Pickett, Mitchell Smith, Mark Smith, all those guys are just, hey, have a night. It doesn't have to be every night, but have a night, So, yeah, Jacob Estes talking a little bit about Trevon Brazile. He's another guy coming in Missouri's recruiting class, but that's obviously all down the road. Right now, it is Mizzou and South Carolina, just a few minutes from tip-off now at Mizzou Arena. I've got 5:55, so should be tipping off in the next 5 to 10 minutes. Again, you kind of see some of the stats, some of the matchups over there. Jeremiah Tillman, obviously the big man's been playing really well for Missouri. That's got a little something to do with why Missouri has won 2 of its last 3. I think this is a big game for Missouri, and I harped on this a little bit in the post game last weekend, but I'm going to do a little bit more here. And because I want to read you their next 7 games after tonight. And not that South Carolina is a gimme. South Carolina is a solid team. They can win this game. But Missouri wins this game, you're looking at 9-2 and 3-2. Then here's the next 7 over the next month or so. At Tennessee on Saturday. That's a tough ask. At Auburn next Tuesday. Auburn's got Sharif Cooper. They're playing really well. That's a different team than it was 3 weeks ago. On the road, that's not going to be a gimme. They host TCU. TCU's not great this year. They should win that game, I think. They host Kentucky. Kentucky, we know all the problems Kentucky's had, but we also know the talent. They're 3-3 in the SEC. They're capable of coming in here and winning. Host Alabama. Alabama's 6-0 right now, playing lights out. Easily the best team in the SEC right now. I don't know that they win it. But right now, they're the best team in the SEC. If they still will be in, 18 days when they come to Mizzou Arena, I don't know. Then they're at Ole Miss, which is a game, again, they should win. I think Ole Miss is the biggest disappointment in the league, but it's a road game sandwiched between Alabama and then a home game against Arkansas, which is, look, Arkansas they've struggled lately. Missouri beat them down there, but that team's got some talent. They could beat Missouri. So I think you've got 7 games that there are no gimmies. There are no automatics after this one. And this isn't an automatic either, but I think it's one that if you want to get to where this Missouri team wants to get to, top 4 in the league, top 4 seed in the tournament, all that, then I think this is a game you need to win to kind of set yourself up, maybe have a little bit of margin for error in that next 7-game stretch. Maybe you can go 4-3 instead of 5-2, So basically, I'm going to wrap this up here pretty quickly. Mitchell Forty is at the arena, as you guys saw briefly before he had to go do his patriotic duty and stand for the national anthem. He will have coverage on the site for you guys throughout the night, throughout the game. Then after the game, as soon as the game's over, we're both going to hop on Conzo Martin's Zoom call. I will record Conzo's press conference. I'll download it. As soon as it's downloaded, I will start the Burger Smokehouse Dance Class postgame show right here. Same YouTube channel. I guess that's what you would call it. But we'll do that. I'm guessing 8:30-ish, somewhere in that neighborhood. We'll play Conzo's press conference. We'll take calls, comments, all that. We'll talk about what happened. Mizzou, South Carolina, getting ready to go from Mizzou Arena. SEC Network coming up in about 3 minutes. John Sunvold and Tom Hart on the call. Mitchell Forty at Power Mizzou. I'll be back here with you after the game. So thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for taking part, and we will talk to you soon.